Picture this. It is the middle of the night. Most of the world is asleep. Families are in their beds. Kids are dreaming. But deep inside the Pentagon, inside locked rooms that most people will never see in their entire lives, something is always moving, always watching, always ready. Because the people responsible for keeping America safe do not get the luxury of sleeping through the night. And on certain mornings that look completely normal to the rest of us, flight trackers around the world light up with something that sends a chill down the spine of intelligence analysts from Washington to Moscow to Beijing. America's E-4B Nightwatch aircraft, the plane that experts and military watchers call the Doomsday plane, takes to the sky. No press conference, no public announcement. Just a massive aircraft climbing silently into the dark. And when that plane flies, the entire world of geopolitical analysis stops and asks one question: what do they know that we do not? Welcome to Crisis Capital. Stay with me, because today we are going to break down exactly what this aircraft is, why its movements matter, and what the current state of global tensions tells us about where the world might be heading. Let us start from the very beginning, because if you have never heard of the E-4B Nightwatch, you need to understand what this machine actually is before anything else makes sense. Most people think the President of the United States runs everything from the White House, and that is true most of the time. But the U.S. military has a backup plan, a flying backup plan. The E-4B is essentially a flying version of the Pentagon itself. It is built on the body of a Boeing 747, but everything inside has been completely redesigned for one purpose: surviving the unsurvivable and keeping America's leadership connected when everything on the ground has been destroyed or compromised. It costs around $200 million to build one of these aircraft. The U.S. Air Force maintains 4 of them, and they are kept ready 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If something catastrophic happens, if Washington is struck, if normal command channels go down, this plane becomes the command center of the entire United States government. It can communicate with submarines deep underwater. It can coordinate with ground forces. It can manage nuclear forces. And because it can refuel in the air, it can fly for days without ever touching the ground. The people who study these systems call it the Doomsday plane. And that name is not an exaggeration. It was built specifically for the scenario most of us pray never happens. Now here is where the story gets really important, and I want you to think about this carefully. The Nightwatch does not fly on a regular public schedule. Unlike Air Force One, whose movements are often reported in advance, the Nightwatch operates with far more secrecy. Open source intelligence analysts, independent researchers who track military movements using publicly available flight data, satellite imagery, and radio signals, monitor this aircraft very closely. And when it appears in the sky, especially when its flight was not part of any publicly announced exercise, it triggers serious questions. Now, to be completely transparent with you, because that is what Crisis Capital is built on, we do not always know the exact reason for every Nightwatch flight. The U.S. military does not announce these movements, and it rarely confirms or denies specific sorties. Some flights are absolutely routine readiness exercises. Others happen in response to real-world developments. The challenge is that from the outside, it is not always easy to tell the difference. What analysts do is look at context. They look at what else is happening in the world at the same time. And right now, the context is deeply concerning. Here is what serious defense analysts and geopolitical researchers have been warning about in recent months. The military and strategic relationship between Russia and Iran has been growing closer. Both countries are under heavy international sanctions. Both have strong motivations to push back against American influence globally. And the concern that keeps coming up in defense policy circles is this: what happens if Russia begins sharing advanced military intelligence with Iran? Russia has some of the most sophisticated satellite surveillance capabilities in the world. Iran has nuclear ambitions and a long track record of confrontation with the United States and its allies in the Middle East and beyond. If that kind of deep intelligence sharing were to happen, if Iran gained access to detailed data about the location of American military assets, about NATO infrastructure in Europe, about early warning systems, it would represent a serious shift in the threat environment. Now, analysts are careful to say this is a concern they are watching, not a confirmed development. But the pattern of cooperation between Moscow and Tehran has been moving in a direction that Western defense planners find alarming. And when threat environments shift, the systems designed to respond to those shifts get activated. The Nightwatch is one of those systems. And this is where things get even more layered, because the Nightwatch does not operate in isolation. Military aviation analysts have documented instances where the E-4B flies alongside another aircraft that most people have never heard of, the E-6B Mercury. If the Nightwatch is the flying Pentagon, the E-6B is something even more specific and even more serious. Its mission is called TACAMO, which stands for Take Charge and Move Out. In plain language, the E-6B exists to send nuclear launch orders to America's ballistic missile submarines if every other communication method has been destroyed or jammed. These submarines are hidden deep in the world's oceans. They are deliberately designed to be impossible to find, and they carry weapons of almost unimaginable destructive power. The E-6B can trail an extremely long antenna through the air, miles long, to communicate with submarines operating at great depths. So when analysts see both the Nightwatch and E-6B aircraft active at the same time, they are not looking at routine background noise. They are seeing two of the most sensitive layers of America's nuclear command and control system operating simultaneously. The military has legitimate reasons to exercise these systems regularly, but the combination of both aircraft being active, set against a tense geopolitical backdrop, is something that no serious analyst simply ignores. Now let us talk about the scale of what we are discussing, because the numbers here are genuinely staggering. It costs approximately $150,000 per hour to operate the E-4B Nightwatch. Every 60 minutes it is in the air, the United States government is spending what many American families earn in multiple years. The U.S. military is not casual with that kind of expenditure. Every flight hour is justified, reviewed, and authorized. That number also tells you something about the seriousness with which America takes the mission of this aircraft. The Nightwatch program, the crews who maintain it, the infrastructure that supports it, all of it exists because the United States concluded decades ago that maintaining an unbreakable nuclear command structure, one that survives even the most catastrophic attack, is worth any price. That is a sobering thing to sit with. The fact that this system exists and is maintained at this level of readiness tells you everything about how seriously the people at the top of the U.S. military take the possibility of nuclear conflict. Here at Crisis Capital, we always follow the financial signals alongside the strategic ones, because markets often reflect fear before the headlines catch up. There is a well-documented relationship between geopolitical tension and certain financial indicators. The VEX, commonly called the Fear Index, measures the level of uncertainty that investors are pricing into the stock market. When geopolitical risks rise sharply, the VIX tends to move upward. Gold, which has been used as a safe haven asset for thousands of years, tends to rise when investors are uncertain about what comes next. These are not conspiracy theories. These are patterns that have played out across decades of market data, from the Cuban Missile Crisis to the Gulf War to the post-9/11 environment. When major institutional investors, the ones managing billions of dollars, start seeing signals of elevated nuclear or military risk, their behavior changes. Money moves toward safety. Riskier assets get repositioned. The people who manage large portfolios do not wait to see what happens. They act on signals. And the movement of aircraft like the Nightwatch is one of the signals they watch. Whether you are an investor or not, understanding this dynamic helps you see how these military and political events connect to the everyday financial world that affects all of us. Now let us zoom out and put everything into its largest possible context, because this is the part of the conversation that most news coverage skips. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, a group of world-leading researchers, physicists, and former nuclear weapons experts, maintains something called the Doomsday clock. It is a symbolic clock that represents how close humanity is to a global catastrophe, especially one involving nuclear weapons. Midnight on that clock means the end. In January 2025, those scientists moved the clock to 89 seconds to midnight. That is the closest it has ever been set in the history of the clock, which was created in 1947 during the early years of the nuclear age. Think about that. These are not people trying to generate clicks or scare anyone into watching their channel. These are scientists who have dedicated their professional lives to nuclear risk analysis, and they looked at the totality of the current global situation, the state of nuclear arsenals, the breakdown of arms control treaties, the rise of new military technologies, the deepening of adversarial relationships between major powers, and they said, we are closer to catastrophe than we have ever been. That assessment did not come from one bad week. It came from years of watching trends move in the wrong direction. Against that backdrop, 89 seconds to midnight on the Doomsday clock, every movement of an aircraft like the Nightwatch carries extra weight. Because these things do not happen in a vacuum. They happen inside a larger story. A story about a world where the arms control agreements that kept the Cold War from turning into something worse have either expired or are under enormous stress. A story about major powers that are competing more aggressively than at any point in recent memory. A story about new technologies, hypersonic missiles, cyber weapons, artificial intelligence in military systems that are changing the rules of conflict in ways that even the experts are still trying to understand. The Nightwatch was designed for a specific era, a specific set of threats. The fact that it remains so central to America's nuclear posture tells you that those threats have not gone away. They have evolved. and the systems built to manage them are still running, still flying, still burning $150,000 an hour to make sure that if the unthinkable happens, someone is still in command. Let me be completely straight with you, because this is important, and Crisis Capital will never talk around the hard parts. We do not know with absolute certainty the specific reason for every Nightwatch flight. The U.S. military operates with layers of classification that are entirely appropriate for national security. Some of these flights are exercises, planned months in advance, designed to keep crews sharp and systems tested. Others happen in response to real-world intelligence that the public never sees. The honest answer is that from the outside, we work with what is visible. Flight tracking data, publicly available signals, the geopolitical context, and the analysis of serious researchers who study these systems professionally. What we can say is this: the combination of factors visible right now, the state of U.S.-Russia-Iran relations, the concerns around military cooperation between adversaries, the Doomsday clock at its most alarming setting ever, and the continued high operational tempo of nuclear command aircraft, paints a picture that serious people take seriously, and you should too. The gap between what governments know and what the public knows is real. It is not a conspiracy. It is how classified national security information works, and it exists for legitimate reasons. But that gap also means that by the time most people realize something significant is happening, the decision makers have often been sitting with that information for days or weeks already. That is exactly why understanding systems like the Nightwatch matters. Because when that aircraft appears in the sky, it is a rare moment when the curtain slips just slightly, and you can see the machinery underneath. You can see that the people responsible for these decisions are taking the current moment seriously enough to activate their most sensitive and most expensive systems. That tells you something. It tells you that the margin for error is not as wide as most people assume when they go about their normal day. What does all of this mean for you? It means that being informed is not optional anymore. It means that the world we are living in right now, with nuclear-armed powers competing more aggressively, with arms control frameworks weaker than they have been in decades, with new military technologies changing the rules faster than diplomacy can keep up, requires a different level of awareness than most of us grew up thinking we needed. Crisis Capital exists because we believe that informed people make better decisions, not just financial decisions, though those matter, but decisions about how they understand the world, how they talk to their families about what is happening, how they think about the future. We are not here to scare you. We are here to make sure that when something important is happening, you are not the last person to know. So here is where we land today. The E-4B Nightwatch is one of the most significant and least understood symbols of the nuclear age we live in. Its existence is a reminder that the most powerful country in the world has built an entire parallel command structure specifically for the scenario where everything we consider normal has been destroyed. The geopolitical environment that surrounds it right now, the Russia-Iran relationship, the state of arms control, the Doomsday clock at 89 seconds, gives every Nightwatch flight a weight that goes beyond routine military logistics. We hope, genuinely, that every one of these flights turns out to be a drill. We hope the tensions that analysts are tracking get resolved through diplomacy before they reach any kind of breaking point. But hope is not a strategy, and awareness is the first step toward anything better. Now, we want to hear from you, because your perspective matters here. Do you think the world is genuinely closer to a major conflict than most people walking around out there realize? Or do you think the media, including channels like this one, sometimes reads too much into military movements that are ultimately routine? There is no wrong answer. Drop your honest thoughts in the comments right now. We read every single one, and the conversations in the comments section genuinely shape what we research and cover next here on Crisis Capital. And if this video gave you information or perspective you did not have before you clicked on it, share it with one person in your life who you think needs to be paying attention to what is happening in the world. One share from you can make a real difference. If you're not already subscribed to Crisis Capital, now is the time, because the next major development in this story is not going to wait for a convenient moment, and you want to be informed before the headlines catch up. We will see you in the next one.